This is the Once Upon a Naija podcast. I'm Evelyn.
And I'm Lara.
So today we are speaking on a really important topic, foundational topic.
The genesis.
The very beginning of, well, I guess even that could be like debated, like the beginning of whose history. We're going to be talking about Nigeria's independence.
Yeah, seeing as that's coming up soon.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Nigeria's independence is, I think, a bittersweet day for all Nigerians. I know it is for me.
How so?
Well, when you look at the current state of Nigeria, it's quite a dire situation for many people. But then when I think of independence, as somebody who was born here in the UK, Nigerian independence was a day, and it was something that I could hold on to so that I could connect back to the country in some way, because the context in which I was living, I'm living in has always undermined Nigeria. So it was something to hold on to as a part of my identity, and that was when I was a child. But then obviously growing up and becoming more aware of the current political situation of the country, that's when I start to ask myself questions as to whether or not this is something we should be celebrating. Well, obviously you have to celebrate your independence and recognize the history, but it always felt something felt false, or it's difficult, I feel.
Yeah, it's interesting you say obviously you're meant to celebrate it, but actually it's not very obvious anymore.
Yeah.
It's becoming less and less obvious because people are having more to sort of say, well, what's there to celebrate? What's there to be happy about? What are we actually celebrating? So as the years rolling by, less and less, I think there's less and less jubilation around Nigerian independence. But then I suppose before we sort of dive into the whole independence shebang and whatnot, I guess the question is why independence? Because to have independence means that once upon a time
we weren't
independent. And yeah, so I think most people know that Nigeria was a colony of the British Empire. We were colonized in 1914.
Yes.
And even before then, the British were already, obviously, they had all their tentacles in the regions that eventually made up Nigeria.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we were colonized by them through indirect rule.
Yeah.
So they indirect rule being that they ruled via local native rulers that they put in place. But also, I think something to highlight is the fact that they put in position of authority people that were deemed illiterate, people that they could easily manipulate, people who, malleable, exactly. So what had happened was there was a lot of them, what was the word? Disposition or no? So basically, I don't know what the word is now, but basically all the rulers who were there prior, who sort of posed a challenge to the British Empire, they deposed them. I believe that's the word. They removed them from their position, and then they installed their own preferred ruler, who was obviously going to dance to their tune. So that was the whole essence of indirect rule. And that happened for many years until some Nigerians became quite discontent. And I think we can dive into that later, but that is basically the foundation of the reason for why we needed to be independent to begin with, because we were colonized.
All those wonderful words of independence, autonomy, self-determination, freedom, you know, those are all like the words that me as an international relations student.
Come on, bring that degree to use. Let them know.
Yes, those are all those wonderful words that come to mind when thinking about independence. It's even part of the reason, like even why I studied that course, because I was in my naivety, I thought international relations would actually be about parts of the world that weren't centered on Europe, but that's even another conversation about the content of that degree. But yes, studying that, I wanted to learn about how nations related to one another, and that was focused on like African politics, and coming from a family that cared about like Pan-Africanism and all of that, which is what many of the quote unquote founding fathers and mothers
let's not forget the mothers.
Really cared about. So those are like those are the things that like inspire me, or I try to hold on to when I'm thinking of
It's funny you said what you expected from your degree was, you know, the scope should probably have expanded beyond European whatnot. Immediately you said that, I thought of people who are fighting to decolonize the curriculum. So like, I guess that was probably something you would have benefited from if your course was a bit beyond Europe. But yeah, speaking of indirect rule, and so when the nationalists when they were fighting for independence, I guess one of the main focus, one of the things that we're really trying to achieve is direct rule.
Yes.
And we know this because we spoke about the last episode. We talked about Fumilayo Ransom Kuti, and we talked about the riots and the fights that happened with the king, that, you know, when they were increasing taxation and all that stuff. Obviously the British had a hand in the whole increase of taxes and stuff, and so that was one of the significant events that was sort of pushing for direct rule from Nigerians. And then there's also another riot known as the Aba Women's. Aba is in the east of Nigeria, and the women, again, they were rioting against the imposition of taxation. Another one was, you know, land acquisition. So Herbert Macaulay is like a really significant figure. I believe his image was on the 1 naira coin. I don't know if the 1 naira coin is still in circulation, but anyway, he was also championing like land acquisitions, because the British came and they were just like obviously taking lands and things like that. And he was fighting. He was one of the, I think he even came to the UK. I wrote about him in my book, Nigerians of Interest, just in case you haven't heard about it in a long time. It's still selling on Amazon, all right, okay. Plug. Shameless plug. So he was also championing people's rights to kind of own their lands and things like that. So these were all the sort of events that were spiraling out of control that sort of led to that, and many other things as well, obviously. But I think that determination to have direct rule in the administration of Nigeria was a critical factor. Yeah. So how do you feel about independence? What's been your, since Nigeria gained independence on the 1st of October 1960?
Yes, let's actually state
the fact, because it's just like, we feel like, oh yeah, independence.
Yes, in case you didn't know, yes, the 1st of October 1960 is the day of Nigerian independence.
And to paint the picture, they were like, I think before midnight, or just as midnight was approaching, they lowered the Union Jack, and then our green, white, green flag came up. There was a joke I saw online somewhere about how, like all these other countries, they have like really colorful flags. There's a cross here, there's a star there, there's stripes here and there. And somebody said like the Nigerian flag, somebody just woke up and said, what's going on? I just put green and they just thought, I need to get this job done before 5 p.m. and they just went over green and then there was like a white blank in the middle. I was like, oh my goodness.
Oh no.
But it's quite a thoughtful flag.
Yes, we're not disrespecting
the flag, because I think Nigeria is one of the very few countries that didn't go to war to gain their independence. And when I was looking a bit more into it, it was good. The flag is meant to obviously depict the peace and unity with which we achieved our independence.
And the reason why I'm saying Kai is because I was thinking of like how we're not
in peace and unity.
Yeah, how we're not in peace and unity. So I was supposed to come back to your question about how do I feel about independence or independent Nigeria now. I definitely, like as I mentioned before, I felt pride in that I was, from a country I could claim heritage to a country that had like fought for their own freedom. And I suppose as I've gotten older, that's morphed into like gratitude and honor. In that I'm really obviously very grateful to the fight of our founding fathers, our mothers, and I see us as like children of freedom. And I know that might sound like romantic and noble, but it's true. Like we are the products, and we are actually the living legacy of what they had envisioned for their future, and that we have our parents had the freedom to move and make their own choices, and that's something that I really hold on to dearly, and I think that's why it's also complex, because then there's the aspect of like my identity as well. And I suppose it's very interesting, like the space I occupy, being British and Nigerian, and my like Nigerian identity is directly and indirectly shaped and intertwined with the British culture. I mean, Nigeria, its name is British, right? When the country gained independence, they didn't change its name. Like other countries, you have Zimbabwe was Rhodesia, Ghana was Gold Coast, which I always find so peculiar and particular that Nigeria didn't change its name.
That's a very good one, and that just reminded me of the quote of a statement by Chief Obafemi Awolowo, and he said, "Nigeria is not a nation. Nigeria is a geographical expression." And then he went and talked about, Nigeria is not a nation in the sense that you have Nigerians are not a people in the same way that you have English or Welsh. And I guess it was talking about like the identity, but I think just to like take that further, just in terms of what you've just said, and like, we could have changed our name, because really it's just like the Niger area is the meaning of Nigeria, and then after independence we could have decided actually we want to forge our own identity. But that's a discussion for another time. But as you were talking, and you were talking about the dreams of our, the freedom we have, and whatever these people were fighting for and all that stuff, I was reminded of a line from the Nigerian national anthem, which is the labours of our heroes past shall never be in vain. And I wanted to ask you the question, like, do you feel like their labours have been in vain? Considering how considering the journey since independence, looking back, would you say the labours of those people who fought for independence, so we're thinking of the likes of Nnamdi Ezekwe, Tafawa Balewa, Obafemi Awolowo, Fumilayo Ransome Kuti, all these people, the things they were fighting for, that joy that they gained from the independence at the beginning, when we look back, can we say, no, what they fought for, we've really sort of pushed it forward, or are we saying, or would you say their labours have sort of been in vain because we haven't really achieved much?
Yeah, I think there's my instinct is to say no, that hasn't been in vain. Number one, I'm here. I'm not I'm not here in vain, but also because I think it's important to take into consideration that Nigeria is still a young country. When you compare it to some other older nations, so you look at, like, I don't know, the US or Britain, like it's like, there's how we understand those countries today. They've had like hundreds of years, whereas Nigeria as we know it today is 61 years old.
62. Well, it's going to be 62 this year.
No, it'll be 60.
Was it 60 last year?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, of course. 2020.
Yeah. So I say no because of that caveat, and I'm not trying to give excuses for like why
we are the way we are.
Yeah. But just understanding that I think we're on a journey. I think there's a lot of uncharted territory. I think that there's much to be discovered in terms of, again, like the questions around like identity and who we are as a nation, etc. But yeah, I felt as though I was going on a bit and going off on a tangent, but I don't think their efforts were in vain. I think in the work of nation building, it's, if you were to compare it to like a pregnancy or something, I don't know what month, I don't know what trimester we're in, but I feel as though I feel as though in the grand scheme of history, human history, we're at the very early stages of building a nation. So I think even though it's very painful right now because so many people are suffering, if the Nigerian project is to continue, there has to be a recognition that there is a long way to go. 60 years, that's one lifetime.
That's true, and that is quite significant because, like you were saying, some countries have changed their names since they got their independence. Many countries have been, characterized by war after war after war, and just a lot of like civil unrest and stuff. And even though we've had quite a lot of significant events happen in Nigeria since we gained our independence, so for example, we've actually had a civil war. We've had the Ghana Must Go event that happened, which was basically like in 1983 when the government of Shagari was ordered quite a lot of West Africans, a lot of whom were Ghanaians, to leave Nigeria because of the economic downturn and whatnot. So that was a moment in Nigeria's history that, since independence, that still till today has a bit of a leftover or aftertaste, that's the word. Yeah. And then again, since our independence, we've had like a very significant period of military rule. And what has happened since our independence, we've had democracy now, and we've had Boko Haram, we've had Chibok girls kidnapped, but we've had a lot of like really good positive moments as well, even though sometimes it kind of evades me and I'm just like, because there's so many negative bad news spreads faster and it sells also, it's really hard sometimes to kind of, upon reflection, to think of the really good things that have happened. But like I was saying earlier during that banter, that lady Stella Adadevo, the sacrifice she made for Nigeria, her quick thinking, her professionalism in that moment when Ebola was in Nigeria, because that is something that could have marred it could have left a very disastrous impact on Nigeria, thinking of the population as well, So the sacrifice that she made, the many notable leaders that we've had out of Nigeria since our independence, we're thinking of what's that lady now, the one who became the president or the leader of the World Trade Organization recently. Not Obi Ezekwesili, no. Oh, I forgot her name now. But yeah, her, even since our independence, we've had a Nigerian become the first African to be Miss World. I know, it's like, I remember the time when Agbani Darego became like Miss World. It was so, he was such a joyous, it was like in football, where like you win the national cup or whatever. It was just like that moment as well for Nigeria for a very long time. But yeah, so we've had a lot of moments. So when the question is asked about have the labours of our heroes been in vain, it's a really difficult question to answer. And I guess,
you think so?
I think to the extent that we haven't achieved what I think we could have achieved in the 60 years since independence. So you're talking about like the pregnancy and what trimester would be and all that stuff. Okay, maybe that's not. I don't know.
we can move away from that
metaphor. I don't want to think about it. But it's almost like a stunted growth.
Yeah.
And I feel like at the moment we're not even growing. And to see the future, it's almost impossible because it's a very dire situation, to use the word you used at the beginning. And I don't know is the answer.
Well, I think probably we suffer from the fact that because we're living through the early stages of we're living, maybe let's use a book as the metaphor. These are the first few chapters, right, of the book. So like I said, it's a journey. There's still so much to discover and be told and events to unfold, and we are literally the characters. We're living in it, so we can only see so far ahead.
But there's something I always say there. So usually when people say, oh, time heals or time will tell and this kind of thing, and I always say, like, there's nothing in time itself. It's this quote, this thing that I got from Martin Luther King, when they were fighting for their civil rights. And I think some leaders and people were saying to him, like, oh, give it time, or they were just appealing to him for time and all that stuff. And he was saying that there's nothing in time itself that changes anything. It's what you do with time that matters, to paraphrase how he said it. But that really stuck with me. So when we talk about we're at the early stages of our journey, I appreciate that, I recognize that. But I just fear that if in the next 60 years, we're going to have time. Next 60 years is going to be a period of time.
Yeah.
And it's really what we do in that period of time that is going to define, or that is going to set the stage for the Nigeria we're going to have eventually. Yeah. So it's almost like we look back now, let's say, okay, all that military rule and all that stuff, they spoiled things and things got really bad. But then we've had like more than 20 years of democracy, and we say, oh, it's still a very young democracy. And it's like, but in the time that we've had though,
I think when I speak of time though, I agree with everything that you're saying. I think it's difficult to answer the question you asked initially though, because you need perspective. I suppose we do have like 60 years of perspective. But the way I think, I'm thinking from the lens of, I'm coming from like a bird's eye view of a timeline, and I'm thinking in like 100-year chunks of like history. Where I suppose in 100, 200 years time, we'll be able to look back and be like, these events had like this impact, right? And that's what I mean by now, because we're living in it, it's difficult to answer that question, because we don't actually have all the information.
Right.
Because there are so many things going on at the same time, unfolding, and you're just trying to process the here and now. As you said, you're trying to process the here and now and just deal with what's in front of your nose. You don't have so much time. And I mean there are parts of our community and society, there are historians who their job is to actually take that bird's eye view, step back and be like, I'm going to note what's going on now, so that for posterity's sake, people look back.
That video that I sent you earlier,
yes,
that man, Professor Banji Akintoye,
yes,
guys, check it out. It's an interview on TVC called Fireworks with Professor Banji Akintoye, and I felt the emotion with which he was speaking, you know, because like you were saying, bird's eye view, here and now. It's almost like a dual conversation, so you can look at it from two perspectives. Yes, the long-term projection of that answer, and then the here and now of that answer. And I guess the here and now, for a man like him who lived in the aftermath of independence, and here to see what has happened since then, and he was talking of, you know, he said he gave a lecture in South Korea one time in 1983, I think it was. He said, 1982 or 1983. And at the time, he said, you know, Nigeria is going to be the black man's world of...
It's going to be the black man's power
nation or something like that. And he said, we were years ahead of South Korea and even many countries. And, you know, there was so much to be proud of. You know, we had like one of the best universities in the world, not just in Africa, in the world. We had one of the best teaching hospitals in the world. We were the largest exporter of groundnuts and palm oil and even of cocoa. So against the backdrop of all of that,
we've regressed.
You know, and he talked about even like how commuting across Nigeria, and how they would just get on a lorry, and you know, you can take your students on excursions to different parts of Nigeria, and you had no fear of what was going to happen to you on the road. He said of when he graduated from, he barely just finished graduating when he had a letter of employment, you know, and he was employed straight after. And he said it wasn't just it wasn't peculiar to him. It happened to many other young graduates like that, you know. And so for someone who has experienced all of that prosperity, and they had so much dream, and you know, because he was a protege of Obafemi Awolowo, and he knew what those people were, what their dream was, what their plan for Nigeria was. And now looking back, he's a very embittered man. You know, he's like, we can blame the military and say, yes, they really did spoil a lot of things. They really derailed a lot of things. But then he said, what's happened since then? What's been the map? What's the roadmap for Nigeria? These democratic rulers, what have they done? So that's why for me, it's like that question is like, I totally agree with you in like in 100 years, you know, but I feel like even that 100 years bird's eye view is already been determined by what's happening now. All these loans that Buhari is that we're taking from China, that we don't know how we're going to pay it back. Every day I'm hearing billions of dollars in the news. They're all going to have an impact, you know? So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I want to be optimistic, but I just feel like based on here and now.
I will say that optimism is our only choice. Optimism is really our only choice.
Yeah.
I mean, what else is there?
What else have we got?
What else have we got? We have to choose hope.
Yeah.
We have to choose hope. We have to, and I don't say that, and many people can view those, I don't know if you call them emotions or whatever, they'll view them, they're not soft.
Yeah.
You know, like hope and optimism is not soft. If anything, they're quite resilient, quite powerful things because they exist, right, in opposition to fear, despair. So I think, yes, we are exasperated, frustrated, you know, and a lot of pain and destruction has happened to a lot of Nigerians, but in spite of that, we hope exists to spite all of that that's come before. Optimism is to spite the despair. Because quite frankly, the way I see that country, like, that country must succeed.
By fire, by force.
No, seriously, that country must succeed. Because there's actually too much at stake for it not to succeed. Right? You have that golden opportunity at the beginning of any nation to kind of like really define who you want to be. Okay, Nigerians decided that we're going to continue in the way of the North and the South will stay together. Whether people now today agree with that or not, that's where we are. And the country is continuing to develop in that way. There are too many people in that country for the Nigerian project to not work. The idea of Nigeria cannot disintegrate because people's lives are actually at stake. You know, because of that. Yes, it's incredibly difficult to have the roughly 300 or so ethnic groups and unite them all and have some sort of patriotic or national identity, but with the people, the Nigerian, I don't know how else to emphasize.
No, I guess you're right, and I think as you were speaking, I was thinking, you're right, because Nigerians are a very optimistic people in the midst of all the chaos that is going on. You know, it was like it go better. No condition is. I remember when I was growing up in Nigeria, every public bus there was always some kind of motivational quote. So like, you see, no condition is permanent. God will do it. Tomorrow go. It was just like, you know, people always. You had to look forward to the next day and what was going to happen. And I think, optimism is all we've got. And I think sometimes we're optimistic to a fault, but regardless, like, you know, you've eloquently put it, we do need to be optimistic. But I think with that optimism, we should also marry it up with a good solid plan. Because there's only so far that optimism will take you. And I think
you need a rugged optimism. You know, one that can withstand all the battering and the back and forth. And there are plenty of people who have that. And you know, even as this podcast comes out, you know, it marks the 1 year anniversary of even when like the NSARS movement started. And I think we can speak about that at another time in more detail when we think about like the future of Nigeria. But yeah, that that rugged optimism is alive and kicking.
Yeah.
Thank
Praise
God.
God. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess to round up, I mentioned earlier that one of the things that the founding fathers of our independence were fighting for was that direct rule of our administration. So my question then would be, do you think Nigeria's been able to, I feel like I'm asking the question, but I know the answer. Well, maybe not, maybe you will surprise me. Do you think we've been able to gain that independence in governance that we wanted? So there's like independence in every area, we're getting independence here and there, but we really wanted that independence to be able to govern ourselves.
Independence because that's the question. It's always have we gained independence, but it's independence from who, what?
Yeah, so independence from the British,
yes,
right? For the right to be able to govern ourselves directly. Now, the question is, have we truly been able to govern ourselves without any
external interference? No.
So then, are we truly independent?
No. It's that. Oh boy. That's a complex question. It's actually, again, going back to my degree. That's a topic that I explored a lot around like neo-colonialism and neo-imperialism, and the fact that Nigeria and many African nations, or many nations in the quote-unquote global south, gained independence from their colonial rulers, but then there were different international apparatus that would maintain control over the nation, and we've spoken about this on previous episodes. When we think of, so one of the vehicles for neo-colonialism is through private enterprise, big companies. So in Nigeria's case, Shell being a multinational corporation, and being able to behind the scenes support influence Nigeria's leaders to do what they want. So in that sense, no, that Nigeria isn't independent, and so that's why it's incredibly important to understand the methods, the new methods in which typically Western and increasingly Chinese countries are using to influence and shape internal domestic policy. But that's a whole dissertation.
Honestly, no, I just wanted to throw that in there because I think it's not a very clear, like you rightly said, are we truly independent? Discuss. I feel like that's an exam question. Is Nigeria truly an independent country? Discuss, evaluate, kind of thing. I think we have. I don't deny the external influence, but I think we have gained enough. We've established ourselves enough to kind of free ourselves of the shackles if we truly want to. So in a sense, I question whether the neo-colonization or whatever you want to call it, if it's just a self-inflicted, if we're just kind of sitting back and taking it.
I'm not denying Nigeria's responsibility in, we do have agency, so it's not because I'm not trying to go into that narrative either, and that we're just subject to the influence. We're educated, intelligent people. So not trying to negate the responsibility at all. But I think in that there's a few things I want to say, in that a lot of the people of Nigeria are just not educated, and that's not as an insult. I mean, it's just a
fact.
It's just a fact. And for any independence movement to continue, you need the majority of people to be politically educated. So when that isn't occurring, you'll always struggle to have freedom in all the arenas of life that you want. But then how do you get people on board with that? I think it goes back to that topic around national identity and allegiance. We spoke about the national anthem. You stand up and you sing it, hand on heart, but most of us these days, it's a struggle to do that.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, to round up soon, I was thinking around what does it mean for a country to, what is like Nigeria's identity? When and how does a country become one? And interesting definitions. So, for a state, you need a people, a territory, a government, and the ability to conduct relations with other states on a sovereign basis. And that, I think, a key thing in that statement or in that definition is a people, right? The Nigerian people. Who or what are the Nigerian people?
Good question. So we shall discuss that. To round off, we'll discuss that in our next episode. We will be looking at Nigerian identity, what it means to be Nigerian. Do we have a national identity, actually? What does it mean to be Nigerian? Discuss. Next episode. But yeah, this has been a good conversation.
Very
I think
reflective.
Yeah. I think it's just really important that we're all able to reflect on a very important day like Nigerian Independence and see how far we've come and what the road ahead looks like, pretty much. But
yeah. So listeners, thank you for joining us today. Happy Independence Day.
Happy Independence.
Yes, join us for our next episode.
You better. You better join us. You better share. You better comment. You better subscribe to our channels.
You see, by fire, by
force. They said we should be optimistic and resilient.
All right. Well, bye, guys.
Bye, guys.